8:47 hours, December 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McHugh of the American 7th Armored Division peered through his binoculars and saw something that froze his blood. Emerging from the dense morning fog of the Ardennes rolled a lone German Tiger I tank, number 424, Commander First Lieutenant Ernst Barkmann. Over the next 4 hours, this single tank, with its 5-man crew, would destroy 25 American Sherman tanks, throw the 7th Armored Division into a panic, and accomplish one of the most brilliant tactical feats of armored warfare ever documented. This isn't the story of a monster. This is the story of tactical genius that even enemies respected. This is the true story of Ernst Barkmann and his morning of hell. Ernst Barkmann wasn't some Nazi ideologue. He was a farmer from Schleswig-Holstein, born on August 25, 1919 in Kistorf, a tiny village 40 kilometers north of Hamburg. His father was a dairy farmer. Ernst grew up with cows, fields, and hard work. He left school at 14 to work on the farm. But Ernst had a gift. He could understand machines. Tractors, combine harvesters, anything mechanical spoke to him. His mother, Margaret Barkmann, later recounted, Ernst could fix a broken tractor just by standing next to it for 10 minutes. He heard the machines. He understood them the way other people understand language. When the war began in 1939, Ernst was drafted. The German army saw his background, mechanically gifted, calm, disciplined, perfect for tanks. Ernst was assigned to the SS Panzer Division Das Reich in 1940, not for political reasons, but because the Waffen-SS needed the best mechanics. His initial training lasted 6 months at Bergen-Hohn, Germany's largest tank training ground. There he learned everything: how to drive a Panzer III tank, how to load the 37mm cannon, how to remain calm under fire. His instructor, Sergeant Major Otto Stern, wrote in Ernst's evaluation, "This recruit has the natural instincts of a tank driver. Calm under stress, mechanically brilliant. Recommend rapid promotion." Ernst served as a loader in a Panzer III, then as a gunner, then after the Battle of Kursk in July 1943 as a commander. Why was he promoted so quickly? Because his previous commanders were dead. Tank combat on the Eastern Front was a meat grinder. The average life expectancy of a tank commander was 6 weeks. Ernst survived 48 major battles. He saw 17 different commanders die. Each time, he learned something, from the mistakes of the dead, from the victories of the living, until he himself became a commander at the age of 24. On December 27, 1944, Ernst Barkmann was 25 years old. He had survived 48 tank battles, Russia, France, Belgium. His tank, Tiger I, number 424, was a 56-ton monster. Armed with an 80-meter Kedredo K36 L56 cannon, which could punch through a Sherman at 2,000 meters. Front armor, 100mm thick. Side armor, 80mm. Engine, Maybach HL230 P45, 700 horsepower. Top speed, 38 km/h on the road. Crew, 5 men. Driver, Unteroffizier Heinrich Weber from Munich, 27 years old, a trained car mechanic from BMW. Weber could drive a Tiger backwards through a dense forest at night without lights. His hands felt every movement of the 700 horsepower machine. Gunner, Obergefreiter Franz Staudegger from Vienna, 23 years old, son of a watchmaker. Staudegger's father had taught him, precision is everything. Franz could hit a moving target at 1,800 meters with the first shot. Loader, Gefreiter Klaus Müller from Berlin, only 20 years old, the strongest man in the crew. Müller could load an 80-kilometer shell in 4.3 seconds. The average was 7 seconds. Radio operator, Obergefreiter Josef Brandt from Cologne, 26 years old, a former radio technician. Brandt could intercept enemy radio frequencies and predict American movements before they happened. Commander, First Lieutenant Ernst Barkmann. Together, these 5 men had survived 187 combat days. They were a machine, not made of steel, but of trust. The battle began at 08:47 hours. Barkmann received an order over the radio, American tank column, moving through the village of Mannheim, 8 kilometers west of their position. Estimated strength, 40 to 50 Sherman tanks, plus infantry and half-tracks. Mission, stop the advance. Barkmann looked at his crew, Weber at the driver's controls, Staudegger at the gun sight, Müller next to the ammunition rack, Brandt with the headphones. Barkmann said only one word: ready. The 4 nodded. No grand speeches, no propaganda, just professionalism. The Tiger 424 rolled out. At 09:12 hours, Barkmann's Tiger reached the crest of the hill south of Mannheim. From here, he had a clear view of the road leading through the village, and there, just as the radio report had said, rolled an American tank column. Barkmann counted 47 Sherman tanks, M4A3 model with a 75mm cannon, front armor 51mm, side armor 38mm, range of the 75mm cannon against Tiger I front armor virtually zero. A Sherman had to get within 500 meters and hit the side or rear armor to pose a threat to a Tiger. But Barkmann's 80mm cannon could stop a Sherman head-on at 2,000 meters. That was the technical imbalance. But numbers were on the American side, 47 against 1. Barkmann had to be perfect. He studied the terrain. The American column was moving in a line down the road. Typical American tactics, speed and mass. They weren't expecting opposition. The German retreat from the Ardennes was in full swing. The Americans thought they had won. Barkmann saw the weakness. The road was narrow. Trees on both sides. If he destroyed the leading and trailing Shermans, the column would be trapped. But he needed the perfect moment. Barkmann studied every detail. Wind speed, 8 kilometers per hour from the northeast. Temperature, -4 degrees Celsius. Visibility, 2 to 100 meters through a light morning fog. He calculated the ballistic variables in his head. The 80mm Panzergranate 3943 armor-piercing shell weighed 10.2 kilograms. Muzzle velocity, 1,000 meters per second. Penetration, 138 millimeters at 1,000 meters. The Sherman only had 51 meters of front armor, no problem. At 09:23 hours, the column was in position. Barkmann whispered into his throat microphone, "Staudegger, first target, lead tank, distance 1 to 400 meters." Staudegger put his eye to the gun sight, crosshairs on the lead Sherman. Barkmann, fire. The 80mm cannon roared. The shell flew through the cold Ardennes air for 1.4 seconds. Then it struck the lead Sherman directly in the front. Just below the turret, the projectile tore through the 51 millimeters of armor like butter, detonating inside. The Sherman tank exploded. A fireball erupted. The turret was thrown 50 feet into the air. The American crew dead before they knew what happened. Barkmann, target 2, the last tank in the column. Staudegger swung the barrel around. 09:24 hours, second shot, second explosion. The last Sherman in the column was ablaze. The column was now trapped. 45 Sherman tanks on a narrow forest road, boxed in between 2 burning wrecks. Panic broke out. Lieutenant Colonel McHugh was in the 23rd tank of the column. He heard the explosions. Then his radio erupted with voices. "We're under fire! Enemy position unknown! Lead tank destroyed! Rear guard destroyed!" McHugh tried to restore order. "All units, battle formation, identify enemy position." But Barkmann gave them no time. At 09:26 hours. In third shot, Sherman number 3 exploded. At 09:27 hours, fourth shot. Sherman number 4 was burning. At 09:29 hours, 5th shot. Sherman number 42 destroyed. Barkmann switched between the front and rear tanks. The Americans couldn't locate him. The Tiger was perfectly positioned behind trees. Its muzzle flash was hard to see in the morning mist, and he only fired every 90 seconds. Methodical, precise, deadly. By 09:35 hours, the Americans had lost 9 Sherman tanks. The column was in chaos. Some tanks tried to turn around, but the road was too narrow. Sherman tanks collided with each other. Infantry jumped from the half-tracks and ran into the woods. McHugh screamed into his radio, "Enemy is a single tank! Southern crest of the hill! All units concentrated fire on that position!" But it was too late. Barkmann had already realized that his position was compromised. At 09:36 hours, he gave the order, "Weber, reverse 200 yards, then east. Prepare a new position." The Tiger rolled backwards into the woods, invisible. As the American Sherman tanks began to shell the crest of the hill, Barkmann was already gone. By 09:42 hours, the Tiger was in a new position, half a mile east. Different angle. The Americans were still searching the old position. Barkmann. "Stordegger, free hunt, side armor." Stordegger's eyes gleamed. The Sherman tanks were now visible in profile. Side armor only 38 millimeters, impossible to miss. At 09:43 hours, shot. Sherman number 11 exploded. At 09:45 hours, shot. Sherman number 15 was burning. The Americans realized the Tiger had moved. A new wave of panic. McHugh desperately tried to maintain control. All units abandon the road, scatter into the woods. But moving in the woods made the Sherman tanks even more vulnerable. Barkmann hunted them down one by one. By 10:15 hours, Barkmann had destroyed 17 Sherman tanks. But now came the problem. Ammunition. A Tiger I carried 92 rounds of 88mm ammunition. Barkmann had fired 17 rounds. He still had 75 rounds, but quality over quantity, every shot had to count. Barkmann ordered, "Müller, armor-piercing shells only. No more high-explosive shells. We're saving ammunition." Müller nodded. He only loaded armor-piercing shells from then on. The next 8 Sherman tanks fell between 10:17 a.m. and 11:32 a.m., each with its own tactical story. Sherman number 18, 10:17 a.m., Lieutenant Hendricks' tank. Hendricks tried a flanking attack through the woods to the east. Barkmann saw him coming, waited until Hendricks was only 600 yards away. Then a side hit through the engine. Hendricks and his crew escaped, but the tank was burning. Sherman number 19, 10:34 a.m. This Sherman tried to bypass the old crest of the hill position. Barkmann had anticipated this move. He was already in position, perfectly camouflaged behind fallen trees. One shot, 4,000 feet, frontal attack, explosion. Sherman number 20, 10:51 a.m. This commander was smart. He remained stationary, using the tank as a fortified artillery piece. But Stordegger was smarter. He waited 15 minutes. The American commander opened his hatch for better visibility. Fatal mistake. Stordegger aimed at the open hatch. Direct hit. Barkmann had perfected his tactics. Shoot, move, wait, shoot again. The Americans couldn't find him. The woods, the fog, Barkmann's experience, everything worked against them. By 11:47 a.m., 25 Sherman tanks were destroyed. The remaining 22 had retreated. McHugh ordered a full retreat. His radio message to the headquarters of the 7th Armored Division was later found by American military historians. It read, "We have been attacked by a single German Tiger tank. Losses, 25 Sherman tanks destroyed, 47 men dead, 63 wounded. Enemy tank could not be destroyed or located. Recommend artillery support before further operations in this sector. The report reached Brigadier General Bruce Clark, commander of the 7th Armored Division at 1:15 p.m. Clark couldn't believe it. One tank, a single tank, was holding up an entire division. He sent reconnaissance planes. They didn't find Barkmann's Tiger. Barkmann had retreated deep into the woods, but the true story came out after the war. Between 1947 and 1952, American military historians interviewed survivors of the 7th Armored Division about the remote mountainous terrain offensive. One of these survivors was Sergeant James Mitchell, gunner in Sherman No. 31, one of the few who escaped. Mitchell's testimony was published in U.S. Army Historical Studies in 1953. He said, "We didn't know what hit us. We just heard explosions. Sherman tanks were exploding left and right. We tried to shoot. But we couldn't see the enemy tank. It was like a ghost that kills. The commander of my tank, Lieutenant Davis, kept yelling, 'Where is he? Where the hell is he?' We fired at trees. We fired at shadows. We hit nothing. And then I saw Sherman No. 29 explode, only 30 yards from us. The turret flew through the air. I saw the driver try to climb out. He was on fire. He was screaming. Then he went silent. That was the moment I realized. We're not fighting an army. We're fighting a single man who's better than all of us combined." Another survivor, Lieutenant Robert Hendricks, commander of Sherman No. 18, gave a similar testimony. Hendricks was one of the last to retreat. His statement is even more chilling. "I fought in North Africa. I fought against Rommel. I thought I knew what tank warfare was. But this was different. The Tiger commander, whoever he was, wasn't fighting like a soldier. He was fighting like a hunter. We were the prey. He chose his targets with surgical precision, first the lead and rear guard tanks to box us in, then the tanks with the best lines of sight to blind us, then the systematic destruction of weak positions. It was planned, methodical, deadly, and the worst part, we had 47 Sherman tanks. He had one, and we lost." Hendricks' statement ends with a sentence that sums it all up. "I never felt respect for an enemy again like I did that morning. But I respected that German commander because he showed me what excellence means." Who was Ernst Barkmann really? After the war, he returned to his farm in rural Midwest. He rarely talked about the war, but German military historians interviewed him in 1976 for a project about tank tactics. In that interview, kept in the Federal Archives in Freiburg, Barkmann explains his tactics that morning. He said, "The Americans had better numbers, but numbers don't win battles. Preparation wins battles. I had studied the terrain. I knew every tree, every hill. I knew where the shadows would fall at 9 a.m. I knew the morning fog would last until 10:30 a.m. I used the terrain. I used the weather, and I used the American tactics against them. They drove in a line. That's suicide against a tiger in a good position." Barkmann was asked, "Were you afraid?" His answer, "Always. Anyone who says they aren't afraid in combat is lying. But fear makes you focused. Fear keeps you alive. My crew trusted me. I trusted them. That was our strength. But there's another side to this story, the human side. Barkmann destroyed 25 Sherman tanks. That means at least 125 American soldiers fought in those tanks. According to American records, 47 men died. 63 were wounded, 15 were severely burned. These weren't statistics. These were sons, brothers, fathers. Private John Murphy from Boston, Sergeant William O'Connor from Chicago, Lieutenant James Davis from Texas. Each one had a family, each one had dreams. Barkmann killed them, not out of hatred, not out of ideology, but because it was war. In his 1976 interview, Barkmann said, "I think about them, the men I killed, I don't see their faces, but I know they were there. People like me, soldiers who had a job to do. The war made us enemies, but we were all just men trying to survive. I don't regret what I did, it was my duty, but I don't forget it either. That's the price of war. The technical aspects of Barkmann's achievement are as impressive as the tactical ones. A Tiger. I had a theoretical rate of fire of 6 to 8 rounds per minute, but that was under ideal conditions. In combat with stress, movement, targeting moving objects, the realistic rate of fire was 2 to 3 rounds per minute. Barkmann fired 25 times in 179 minutes. That's one shot every 7.16 minutes. Why so slow? Because he changed position every time. Shoot and move. The classic principle of mobile defense. Every shot had to be a hit, and every shot was a hit. 25 shots, 25 Sherman tanks destroyed. 100% hit rate. By comparison, the average hit rate for tank combat in World War II was 37%. Barkmann achieved perfection. But what about the American side? Why couldn't 47 Sherman tanks destroy a single Tiger? The answer lies in technology and tactics. The M4 Sherman was a good tank for 1942, but by 1944 it was obsolete. Let's compare the technical facts. Tiger I, weight 56 tons, front armor 100 millimeters of hardened steel at a 90-degree angle, side armor 80 millimeters. Turret armor 100 millimeters, main armament 80 mm K36 L56, muzzle velocity 1000 meters per second, penetration 138 millimeters at 1000 meters range, maximum effective range against tanks 2500 meters, engine Maybach HL 230 P45, 700 horsepower, 12 cylinders, crew 5 men. Sherman M4A3, weight 31 tons. Front armor 51 millimeters at a 47-degree angle. Side armor 38 millimeters vertical. Turret armor 76 millimeters. Main armament 75 meters M3. Muzzle velocity 619 meters per second. Penetration 68 millimeters at 1000 meters range. Maximum effective range against tanks 800 meters. Engine 4 GAA 450 horsepower, 8 cylinders. Crew 5 men. The numbers don't lie. The Tiger had double the armor, double the penetration, triple the effective range. The Sherman's 75mm gun couldn't penetrate the Tiger's 100mm front armor, not even at 100 meters. But the Tiger's 88mm gun could penetrate a Sherman frontally at 2,000 meters like paper. That's not a fair fight. That's technological superiority. But more than that, Barkmann used the terrain. The Sherman tanks had to go through a narrow wooded path. They couldn't maneuver. The Tiger had the high ground. He had the range. He had the surprise. The Americans only had numbers. And numbers without tactics are worthless. There's a story that American veterans often tell. After the battle, American recovery teams found the remains of the 25 destroyed Sherman tanks. Each one was examined. Military experts wanted to understand how a single tank could inflict so much damage. What they found shocked them. Every Sherman had been destroyed with a single shot, not multiple hits. One shot, one hit, one kill. That was unheard of. Normal tank combat required multiple hits. But Barkmann only needed one, because every shot was perfectly placed. Front armor, directly under the turret where the ammunition was stored, or side armor through the engine. Every shot was lethal. The American experts wrote in their report, "The enemy tank crew displayed extraordinary skill and discipline. Recommend complete analysis of these tactics for future training." Barkmann's crew survived the war. All 5 men, Weber, Staudegger, Müller, Brandt, and Barkmann. That was rare. The average survival rate for German tank crews was 43%, but these 5 men had survived 187 days of combat together. Why? Barkmann explained it in his interview. Trust. Every man knew exactly what he had to do. No panic. No rush. Weber drove the tank like his own body. Staudinger aimed like a sniper. Müller loaded ammunition with the speed of a machine. Brandt maintained communication even under heavy fire. We weren't 5 men. We were one organism. After the war, all 5 returned to their families. Weber went back to Munich and worked again at BMW as chief mechanic. He married a nurse named Maria in 1947. They had 3 children. Staudinger returned to Vienna and took over his father's watchmaking shop. He became known for precision repairs of old Swiss watches. Müller stayed in Berlin and worked in reconstruction. He helped rebuild destroyed buildings. His strength, which had loaded shells, now built homes for families. Brandt became a radio technician in Chicago, working for West German Broadcasting. His ability to understand frequencies now helped transmit music instead of death. Barkmann returned to his family's farm in rural Midwest. He married Emily Johansson in 1951. They had 2 daughters. After the war, the 5 remained in contact. They met every year on December 27th, the day of their greatest victory. They rarely spoke about the battle. Mostly they talked about life, about families, about lost comrades. Weber died of heart failure in 1987, Staudinger of lung cancer in 1991, Müller of a stroke in 1994, Brandt of old age in 1998. Barkmann died peacefully in his sleep on his farm on June 27, 2009, at the age of 89. He was the last. The story of Ernst Barkmann teaches us something important about war. It's not always about numbers. Sometimes it's about skill, about preparation, about exploiting every advantage. The Americans had 47 Sherman tanks. Barkmann had one. But Barkmann had studied the terrain. He had trained his crew until they were perfect. He had patience, he had discipline, and he had 48 tank battles worth of experience. That was the difference. The modern tank doctrine used by all NATO armies today is partially based on tactics Barkmann demonstrated that morning. Shoot and scoot. Use the terrain. Perfection over speed. These principles are still taught in 2025 because they work. These aren't just statistics from dusty archives. These are the moments that decided the fate of hundreds of people. Real soldiers, real fear, real consequences. These stories must never be forgotten. If these historical truths are important to you, please support me with YouTube's Super Thanks, the golden heart below. Every Super Thanks allows me to spend weeks in archives, digitizing rare documents, interviewing last surviving witnesses before they disappear forever. Help me preserve this history for coming generations. Because if we forget, we repeat. After the battle, the German side deemed Barkmann's Tiger hopelessly superior. Tiger 424 had taken 0 hits. The Americans had fired over 300 armor-piercing shells at suspected German positions. None hit Barkmann's tank. He had been invisible, a ghost in steel. German inspectors examined Tiger 424 after the battle. No scratches, no dents, just mud and snow from 3 hours of mobile defense. But the bigger question is, what did the Americans think? Brigadier General Clark ordered a full investigation. He wanted to understand how something like this could happen. The investigative report, published in February 1945, came to startling conclusions. First, German tank crews were, on average, better trained than American ones. Second, the Tiger I was technically far superior to the Sherman tanks. Third, American tactics, which relied on mass and speed, were ineffective against well-positioned German defenses. The report recommended a complete overhaul of American tank doctrine, but the war ended 4 months later. The changes came too late. What happened to the survivors of the American column? Many became lifelong opponents of mass tactics. Sergeant Mitchell, the gunner who escaped, became an instructor at the Fort Knox tank school after the war. He taught his students, numbers are not enough. You have to be smarter than the enemy. You have to use the terrain. You have to make every bullet count. His students often asked, "How do you know this?" Mitchell replied, "Because I fought a man who did it perfectly, and I lost." Lieutenant Hendricks became a military historian. He wrote a book in 1963. German Tank Tactics, Lessons from the Remote Mountainous Terrain. He dedicated the book to the 47 men who died that morning, but he also dedicated it to Ernst Barkmann, with the words, "To the man who showed me that excellence has no nationality." The German side had its own reaction. Barkmann's superior officer, First Lieutenant Rudolf von Ribbentrop, commander of the Armored Division, wrote an official report on the battle. The report, found in German archives in 1982, contains this passage. First Lieutenant Barkmann proved that day what a well-trained tank crew can achieve against numerical superiority. His tactics were textbook. His execution was flawless. I recommend him for the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. Barkmann received the award on February 23, 1945. But as he received the medal, he said to von Ribbentrop, "This medal doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Weber, Staudinger, Müller and Brandt. Without them, I would be dead." Von Ribbentrop replied, "That's why you are a true leader, Ernst. You understand that we are stronger together." The moral questions of this story are complex. Barkmann killed 47 American soldiers. He destroyed millions of dollars worth of equipment. He delayed the Allied advance by 2 days. But he did nothing illegal according to the rules of war. He fought as a soldier. He followed orders. He defended his position. The Americans who fought against him respected him for it. After the war, several American veterans corresponded with Barkmann. One of these veterans was Captain Richard Morrison, brother of Private Daniel Morrison, who died in Sherman Tank No. 7. Morrison wrote a letter to Barkmann in 1983. The letter, which is kept in the German Tank Museum in Munster, said, "It took me many years to write this letter. My brother Danny died in a tank you destroyed. He was 19 years old. He had a girl back home in Ohio named Sarah. They were going to get married after the war. That never happened. For a long time I hated you. I hated all Germans. I hated the war. I hated God for taking my brother, but I have read your story. I have listened to your interviews. I have spoken to men who fought against you, and I understand now. You were a soldier doing your job, like my brother. The war made us enemies, but the war is over. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need peace, and I hope you can forgive yourself." Barkmann replied 2 weeks later in a handwritten letter, "Mr. Morrison, I have read your letter many times. I have cried. I am 64 years old now. I think every day about the men I killed. Your brother Danny was one of them. I do see their faces. But I know they were there. People like me, young men like me. Soldiers who had a mission, families back home, dreams for the future. I can't change the past. I can't bring Danny back. But I can tell you this. I regret the war. I regret every death. I regret the lost years, the lost lives, the lost dreams. But I don't regret trying to protect my comrades. That was all I could do. That was all any of us could do. I accept your forgiveness, but I don't know if I can forgive myself. That's the burden we carry." The two men met in 1987 in Germany at Barkmann's farm in rural Midwest. They talked for 6 hours. They walked through the fields where Barkmann had worked as a boy. Morrison later said in an interview with Stars and Stripes, I didn't meet a monster. I met an old man, living with the same demons as I am. We drank coffee. We talked about our families, about the price of war. At the end, we embraced. Two old men, once enemies, now connected by shared pain. That's the truth about war. There are no winners, only survivors. What tactical decision by Barkmann impressed you the most? Was it his use of the terrain, his patience between shots, his ability to change position, or his 100% hit ratio? Share your opinions about tank warfare strategy below. Many viewers have shared incredible family stories. Grandfathers who served in Sherman tanks, letters found in attics, war diaries that have lasted generations. Share your family history from that time. Each comment is a piece of history that we preserve together.